joining us to hear about our project over here on Wirral. So with me today I've got Sonia Carty, who's our project lead as well. So between the two of us we'll be talking through our project over the the last year and a half. And what we wanted to do is just sort of take you through a few slides just to talk you through, there we go, just to run you through a bit of background before Sonia takes over talking about the project itself. So for those of you that don't know much about the Wirral, we're a peninsula situated just next to Liverpool. We have just under 320,000 people that live on the Wirral, and obviously we're quite unique in that we are surrounded by water on three sides. So it's a very interesting makeup across the borough, and we have quite an unusual makeup in that there's quite an east and west divide across the borough as well when it comes to a lot of health inequalities. But when it comes to activity levels, just over a quarter of our residents are categorised through the Sport England data as being inactive, and we have found that majority of those of our inactive residents are populated in the most deprived wards as well within the borough. We do index quite high for people with long-term conditions living on the borough. We've just got around 70,000 people that have long-term conditions, and again they're mainly situated in areas of deprivation within the borough. Although life expectancy on the Wirral has been increasing, the healthy life expectancy has decreased over recent years, and this has put a real strain on our health and social care as well. And the onset of poor health is quite young. It's for men across the Wirral, our average age is 61, and it's 63 for women. And obviously it is quite concerning because it's up to 5 years before a pensionable age. So it's quite an area of concern that we're also contributing, hopefully, by providing opportunities for people to be more active. And disparities in these ages are really seen in some of our boroughs across the borough. This can be a difference of up to 19 years compared to one area and another area in the borough. It's quite dramatic in the change. So just to talk you through our learning objectives for this project, when Sport England approached us, we were able to, we obviously really were excited about this opportunity to learn through talking to a lot of our stakeholders, talking to our partners, and getting into the real voice of our community to see what the best way to roll out a project to support people with long-term conditions to become more active was about. And it really worked well for us because it aligned with our strategic direction as us as leisure services and a local authority, because we just started the journey at pulling together the new sport and physical activity strategy for the borough. So there was quite a shift from us being a local authority that provided facilities and had quite a transactional relationship with our residents to making sure that everything that we were focusing on was contributing to reducing the health inequalities across the borough. So it was a really good time for us, and we spent an awful lot of time listening to people. We've worked with colleagues in neighbouring boroughs to hear about what projects had worked for them, and we came up with an ambassador-led project that we were looking at, so to make sure that we could support people with long-term conditions in the best way possible, and really trying to focus on the sustainability of the project. We really wanted to make sure that we could measure the impact for both participants and the volunteers, and that we had something really tangible when we came to the end of this learning piece, that we can develop some really core sort of shareable learnings for whether it be other areas looking at doing something different, but also to support our residents in the long-term ambition to get people more active. And our approach, it was very much in a collaborative approach across this, and we had some real design principles at the start of the project, but like most other projects, COVID and the uncertainty around the pandemic had to make us shift really quickly. So some of the principles that we used in our approach were collaborative and making sure that everything we did was with partners and using the voice of our community through what we did, and using as many local people and intelligence as possible. The other principle that we used to make sure that there was diversity and real lived experience at all levels of this project, and we found, I know Sonia will come on to talk about that more when we get into the project. And the other area was just agility and our ability to adapt to the changing circumstances with COVID and the pandemic. And I think everything that we had down on paper for the original project was very much around having personal contact with people. So we really needed to make sure that this was agile and we could respond to the restrictions that were being put in front of us as well. And we made sure at all points that the evaluation of everything we did was there in the forefront. So making sure that we had good coverage in all areas as well. So I'll pass over to Sonia now and she can talk more into the detail of the project.
Hi everybody, so I'm Sonia Carty, I'm the coordinator of this project. Just a little bit about me. I came into post on the 1st of April 2020, which I actually thought could have been an April Fool because I was asked to deliver a project where the target market was actually shielded completely from view and from their physical activity as such. So that was a huge challenge, which I rolled my sleeves up and off I went. Just you can see on the screen now that we did manage to make quite a bit of impact on our local community. We had physical well-being. 33% said that their physical well-being had improved through the project. Just to let you know that we questioned people 12 weeks apart. So they first came onto the project. We asked them some questions about their general well-being, how they felt, the amount of physical activity they were currently doing, what they used to do, had their activity gone down during COVID or gone up at all. And then we questioned them 12 weeks apart to see if their physical activity had improved, had their well-being improved, their mobility and such like. So we can see 33% said their physical well-being had improved, and that's the MVPA, so the moderate to vigorous physical activity had improved. And also you can see the mobility. 47% reported their mobility had improved as well from the base levels of when they first joined us. 27% were able to maintain the physical activity and the amount they were doing and their habits. And when we look, we did use the combi model for those of you who are familiar with it. That's talking about people's physical activity and their potential change in behaviour. So them having the capability for physical activity, the motivation, and also the opportunity to do that. So also when we look at the trans-theoretical model, I'm not going to go into that in any detail today, but that looks at the stages people are at on their behaviour change. For instance, we can look at our mental well-being has increased for people, and also social well-being. That's talking about people who have progressed from contemplating doing some physical activity to actually actioning their physical activity. So as you can see, 20% reported a reduced feeling of loneliness, which was really important to us through COVID. You know, things happened in this project that we really didn't foresee, as I'm sure it did with other projects. So we were happy to adapt and find a way through that, which really worked in the end. Okay, also Sarah did mention that we had quite a few volunteers join us. So that was about having our ambassadors with us. And as you can see from the slide, 79% of those ambassadors said that they used their own lived experience to benefit others, and that was a real motivation for them joining our project. So what I did is reach out to as many people as possible, whether that was through social media or whether from leaflets or emails with partnership working. And that was to, even our internal staff helped with that as well and came forward. We had quite a few people who had long-term conditions of their own, whether that be asthma, whether that be, we had a lady with Parkinson's, and coupled with cancer as well. They actually came forward to help with their lived experience to how they could help others who were participants in the programme, to prove to them that, you know, there is no bad side to physical activity as long as you do it within your comfort zone and you look outside the box. You know, physical activity isn't all about putting your tracksuit on and running back round the block. I used to laugh when I phoned people up to say, you know, I haven't got my stopwatch here. I'm not expecting you to run upstairs and put your trainers on and run around the block and I'll time you. It's not like that at all. We need to look outside the box. We need to see whether you can maybe walk to the local park when we could do exercise when COVID allowed us to, or even just walk up and down the stairs or walk up and down your hall at home. It all mattered and it was all important for those people who had a garden. It was important to get outside and do a little bit of gardening, as I say, we also helped with a goodie bag that we sent out to people, and that was to try and encourage them to start doing some exercise at home. And inside the goodie bag was a therapy band. So I think some other of the projects have used this as well. We also sent it out with some information, with some exercises that people could do, and they could be doing that in their living room or anywhere they wanted that they felt comfortable to do it. Okay. So what we also found was it was helping people with long-term health conditions to have regular contact. So as Sarah mentioned, right at the beginning, we had envisaged that this project would be seeing people face to face. It would be linking the arms of those people that turned up at our leisure centre doors. They may never have been in there since school time. We found people who had a bad experience at school and didn't want to involve themselves in physical activity again, and maybe hadn't been inside any of our leisure centres or even to any exercise classes in our community centres or anywhere nearby. It was intended that we would help people break down those barriers, whether it was confidence, lack of confidence, anxiety, anything like that. We were going to show them around our leisure centres, show them where swimming pools are, where the toilets are, where the classes take place, to break down any of these worries they had. However, this didn't happen because of COVID. But what we did is we changed slightly what we did, and we kept in touch with those people via phone. And this opened up opportunities that we probably hadn't thought of in the beginning. We would have maybe had one phone call to begin with and then just tried to meet people face to face. But this really helped build up a rapport. And those volunteers I mentioned earlier who had that empathy to help with motivation and could help with those feelings of what it meant to feel isolated, or what it meant to feel that you weren't quite capable of doing those physical things that you could once before you had your long-term health condition. So it was a really important factor. We found that not only were our ambassadors living and breathing people with those conditions, but also they could empathise. They were on the other end of the phone, and they all had their own clients, and they would ring them up. Some people needed to be rung up once a fortnight. Some people really wanted 1 or 2 phone calls a week, and our resources meant that we could do that. The volunteers that came to us, some people had been put on furlough from work, so we're more than happy to give their time to give back to their local community. Other people could join us on a long-term basis. So it was really great to have real people from the community helping the rest of the community, and that proved a really fantastic way of going about things. So this is one ambassador who's just a quote to say that for one particular lady, a training course that Sonia had put on, and it was a basic about encouraging her to stand up during the adverts when she was watching the television. And the ambassador felt a little bit strange saying this to the lady to begin with, but she reported back that, you know, the lady was really keen. It really got her engaged and involved, and she was keen to report back how many times she had stood up during the adverts and what she had achieved during the adverts. So it helped the ambassadors to understand themselves even that the very smallest amount of movement really, really does matter. And when someone starts on such a low level, then they have that SMART goal in place where they can achieve it, and that helps them to then look to the future, to medium and longer term goals, that they can do this. And the ambassadors were so good and such a great source of motivation for that. Also, one ambassador said, we've just done the miles in May, and that helped to really motivate people. The miles in May came as an idea from one of our participants who wanted us all to collectively engaged in some activity. So we didn't set what that activity was. We just allowed people to go out, whether they wanted to walk, whether they wanted to cycle. We had a little bit of swimming outdoors at the time because we could, and a little bit of stand-up paddleboarding. So we added all our miles together, and that really gave us cohesion of the group, and people were really motivated by that. So that was really, really helpful. Okay, so we had some highlights and we had some lowlights, and there is a slide a bit later on for this in more detail, but I'm sure people can get that back on the recording. I don't want to dwell too much and go into too much detail with things, but to begin with, it was intended that we just had GP referrals. So we have health coaches and social prescribers in our GP practices. So this means that anyone with a long-term health condition could then be referred into our We Are Undefeatable project. So that's how it worked to begin with, but then obviously COVID meant a lot of people were dragged off into other forms of employment, and it was all about the COVID response and how we could help with that. So what we decided to do was open it up to self-referral as well. So this in the beginning didn't feel as safe because we didn't know, we were only as good as what people were telling us. So obviously if someone tells us they don't suffer with blood pressure, and then they talk about their medication and it's blood pressure tablets, we say, well, you must have blood pressure issues to be on those blood pressure tablets. So that really helped us engage with people and build up a huge rapport about what they were capable of and what was safe for them to do, whether they were to go out and venture close by their own houses, or whether they were better being indoors where they were safe, and whether they would stay sitting down. We gave them options to sit down. We had some videos we sent out. There was all sorts of different things and different ways that we helped people with, depending on what level they were at of their activity level. Also, all the additional phone calls really helped. We had to build those phone calls as much as we could due to COVID. So what we started doing was actually asking those people, what will you do before I speak to you next week? What is it you're going to concentrate on? Even if it's eating some healthy, healthy kind of meals, or is it going to be, you've done some activity? And they would report back, and that was really great. So we had a database up and running at all times where we could constantly fill that database in just to see how people were improving along their journey, because that's what mattered to us. We needed to prove that our intervention meant that someone was going to what might be a very low level, if any activity at all, into building up even to small amounts and bigger amounts, to prove to themselves they could, basically. So we also had some negative things. Negatives aren't always bad. It helps us to move forward and do things better in the future. Some of the ambassadors felt they didn't have quite enough knowledge. They also commented that they received an awful lot of training, but they felt they didn't have a complete knowledge of those speciality kind of illnesses like Parkinson's, like arthritis, that different bits like that. I mean, none of us are an expert in that field, but as long as we kept the activity really low level and within a comfort zone, and we were in touch with GP practices where necessary, then it was okay to go ahead. And everyone did really well. We said never go into pain, never go into discomfort. And we found that that really motivated them, because some people showed that they were frightened of feeling any discomfort at all. So it was trying to help educate of what is discomfort in a good way and what is discomfort in a bad way. Because if we're using our muscles in certain ways for the first time, then it will be slightly uncomfortable. And we had a program where as soon as lockdown was over, we could start to see people face to face and really go a bit more into detail and see how we could help those people the most. The capacity of the project coordinator was brought up. That's because I think I felt quite swamped, quite isolated, and I wished I could do more and more. But my capacity, I was employed part-time, and at one point I had 18 ambassadors who were really very helpful, but as volunteers they wax and they wane, because they had other things to get back to. They had new jobs coming up that was coming out of COVID, and so they did drop off bit by bit, and I was trying to juggle everything and push the project forward while trying to muck in myself. So I think it really helped me to understand that to do something properly and do it well, you do need a team around you. And we'll talk about that later with other projects we picked up along the way. So the impact of COVID, I do challenge myself to try and get through a presentation without mentioning the pandemic or COVID. But with this one, it's impossible because it really did impact on us greatly. But it also helped us to realise that we could be so flexible and move the goalposts completely that we didn't see coming, and we still came out the other side and really pushed things forward and managed to get some really good results. This is just an example of one of our ladies, was Kathy, and we first met her because as we were coming out of lockdown, we put on what we tried to look at different opportunities, and we were in the summer months, so we put on some sailing, some kayaking, some stand-up paddleboarding, and some power boating. So this was for people who might enjoy being in the outdoors. Lovely bright sunshine out there. I would come down. We've got a lovely marine lake near to where we are in West Kirby, and it was great to see smiles on people's faces. It was something a little bit different, but we thought, why not? And we really got a good reaction from this. Kathy used to do a lot of stand-up paddleboarding when she got into it. She'd never done it before, and she really loved it in the end. So when we spoke to her and did some interviewing with her, she went through a few bits and pieces of the impact as Ambassador had on her. Kathy won't mind me saying that she suffered from mental health issues, from anxiety and depression. She also suffered from fibromyalgia. She made the comments that the ambassadors made a really big impact on her, because she knew they were always there at the end of the phone, and she would just text them and they would always come back to her, and she knew she could reach out to them, especially in lockdown when she felt quite isolated, as we all did. Notice a change in physical well-being levels. Kathy said it was so great to be out and about again on the lake sessions, and it was great to not only have opportunities to get involved with those sessions, but also to have people there who could support her during those sessions. She thought she wouldn't have had the confidence to come down there on her own without knowing that some of the ambassadors and team would be there to help her and support her and motivate her to have a go at something she'd never done before. She states the effects of isolation were really quite profound, really. She explains that they sent her into quite a dark place, and without the help of our programme, she felt she recovered quickly from that dark place with the help of our motivation and the opportunities to do some physical activity. Okay, so Kathy agrees with a lot of other people that the mental well-being really did improve and helped her to get through COVID, if anything. And I think that's an outstanding result that came out of this. We couldn't foresee COVID coming, but we know that our project really helped people to get through COVID. I remember speaking to a guy who lived in a flat. He had no garden, obviously, and he just had a tiny balcony. And he said the phone calls were so important because he had no real way of getting out or to get any exercise in. So he would literally walk up and down his living room. He would do some work with the therapy bands, and we gave him a video, a DVD of some exercises and a little bit of Tai Chi, because that's what he'd used to be interested in before COVID came. So Kathy also describes that doing some physical activity helped her with her long-term health condition, and she also did say that the ambassadors helped her because they were a living proof that, you know, anyone can do this and just push forward. Enjoy yourselves along the way, which was a real big thing. We always like to have a laugh at our sessions, and you know, always bring the fun factor to things. And she said it's changed her attitude to a long-term health condition. She knows she can do it, and she can push herself to do it, and not just make up excuses not to do it. She knows she'll feel so much better afterwards. Okay, so these screens speak for themselves, really, but just to say 120 people were involved in the programme, the participants. Now, that did get up to the best part of 150, but these slides were made just before the end. 67% of those who inquired about the programme did indeed start their We Are Undefeatable journey. As you can imagine, it was quite hard to make contact with people and keep them engaged because of they had other priorities in life. Where do I get my food from? Where do I get my shop from? I'm feeling isolated, and it was nice that we could make such a big difference. 36% of those who engaged from the start made it right through to the end of the programme. So there was a good number of people who really found a lot of positives in what we were doing. And I'd also go as far to say they actually relied on us an awful lot to get them through. And they have stuck to their exercise in many cases, and gone on to other health projects that we are running in our leisure centres and in the local area. The average age of participants was 58 years old, and 27% were male and 73% female. Those numbers were pretty static all the way along, actually, and also interestingly, our participants were spread right across our borough. As Sarah said, we do have some deprived areas and bits of differences, but this project showed that there was a need right across the borough that we did identify. You might not be surprised to know that mental health was the main reported long-term condition that we were dealing with. And people often had multi-morbidities, which I noticed on a personal level. That and quite often the things we hear about now that were increasing during COVID, so your mental health obviously, but also your obesity and diabetes, people were coming up with those complaints all along, and they made the point that they felt as if they could get some weight off, then it would really help the rest of their conditions. We hear all the time that people put an awful lot of weight on during COVID and lockdown. I know I did myself, so that did exacerbate people's conditions for sure. During the training for those ambassadors, they were really pleased to gain some training, whether that was first aid training online or that was mental health training online. They attended 35 webinars, and they included how to help people with behaviour change as well, which I found really interesting myself. and 22 courses that were online, including run leader courses and also courses for health walks. We've got a lot of leaders in that as well now. The miles in May I chatted about earlier. We managed to do 492.5 miles between us all. So that was something that the ambassadors and the participants could get involved in together. And we had our final total, which was just under 500 miles. So brilliant. Just to say that 14% of everyone who participated, they did go on to ask for a membership to our leisure services. Now we have come out of lockdown and they are still engaging with their physical activity on a long-term basis, which is lovely to see. Something we're quite proud of is we were finalists for the APSI award. That was for people in leisure services and any teams that had gone out of their way to adapt and be flexible during the COVID period. So APSI is the Association of Public Service Excellence, and we were really proud to be finalists for that. We didn't win, but we were finalists nonetheless. Okay, that's just a little bit more detail on our findings. I'm not going to go through all of that now because that's quite a busy slide, and I have already covered the main points of that, so that can be looked at during the recording feedback. Okay, just to say that we feel that the blueprint for We Are Undefeatable is such a success that I feel the kind of business model is brilliant for taking it forward. We'd love to be able to continue our We Are Undefeatable and sustain our project, but at the moment the funding has come to an end, and we are constantly campaigning in the background to find a way to pick that up, because everything is there that we need, and we found it to be such a positive in our local community that I really hope that we can follow it up again in the future. We will continue to look at sustainability of that and bring it back whenever we can. Our latest health project is via public health, which is weight management. So the same working model is being used. I am leading a team now of staff, and they are rolling out a weight management program, which does, it obviously has the legacy of We Are Undefeatable with it. So it will hopefully prove successful. So when we look at our reach, it's really been great. We had a YouTube channel that had 450 views, our Facebook having 900 likes very often. The first posts on Facebook were viewed 4.6 thousand times. So we know we've had a really great reach to our local community, and beyond that, our partnerships have been fantastic. And I think that we've hardly touched the surface of our partnerships, because we have so much work to continue with those. So many NHS departments for sure, neurophysiotherapy, physiotherapy for teens, drug and alcohol services, prostate cancer, mental health, all GPs with social prescribers and health coaches. GPs individually come to us and ask us about the We Are Undefeatable project. Cardiac teams, Wirral Mind, MenCap, and that's besides all of the Richmond charities that I've been in touch with and really were very, very helpful. Anyone who's local on the Richmond charities, I'm still in touch with them, and that has just blossomed any partnerships we've had and really made a great reach, and meant we've got so many projects that can come up in the future with this blueprint in mind. So really appreciate you for listening. The next slide is just our recommendations, and if any other projects are looking to do this, we would say we would recommend that you would involve your service users at the beginning to look at what physical activity you might put on. So this really helped with us from chair-based exercise, that people think exercise is too much for them. if they're not used to it or they've got a long-term health condition. We were very keen to let them know you can actually sit in a chair to do a lot of exercise. A lot of fundamental exercise can be done in a chair. We do twisting, we would do reaching to get things out of cupboards, we do twisting to put your seatbelt on, you know, all sorts like that. It's very fundamental to how people go about their lives. Also looking outside the box, obviously, with being on our marine lake, with the open water swimming at some point we did, stand-up paddleboarding, etc. And I'd really involve your service users because their voice really matters. And the fact that we listened to them really meant that they were engaged in our project and they didn't feel embarrassed about coming forward because they found us very approachable. I think it's a recommendation to look at involving your partners a great deal. There's so many out there that I didn't even realise how many partners there were, and the potential of work that could be done until I scratched the surface. We found that self-referral and referral works, and if we hadn't done this project in COVID, we wouldn't have found this out, because some people like the doctor in the white coat and really believe in what he's telling them and will only do what he says or she says. And some people actually prefer to self-refer because they don't want to be prodded and poked. So that's what we found across the board. So we offer both. Always be aware of the digital divide. We did an awful lot on social media and via emails and live broadcasts, but we also were very mindful always along the way that leaflets and you know, I knocked on doors and gave goodie bags and stood back and had a conversation at the garden gate due to COVID many times, and that was really valuable. So always be aware of the digital divide. Yeah, so always involve your service users in what you're doing. That gives them empowerment along the way. Just a few photographs up in the corner there of what we did get up to. We also have an allotment as well, our health walks. We did some swimming with a guy with cerebral palsy when we were allowed to swim. So the disappointment was we did have a video planned at one stage, but we couldn't get close to our participants to actually film that. So these are just distance photographs that I could do. And then the odd bits that we were allowed to do once we came out of lockdown. So thank you so much for listening. There's so much more I could say, so it's trying to fit it into a tight window of space, but I could go on, but I'm going to leave it there. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Sonia, and thank you, Sarah. That was really, really interesting. I think for quite a focused project, there's so much in there to actually unpick, and actually quite a few questions and some really nice comments have come through on the chat as well. As we've got a couple of minutes left, I'll go through a couple of those questions if that's all right. So your programme is obviously somewhat unique in that it used ambassadors to engage directly with participants in the programme. I wondered if you could talk a bit about how you found the right kind of people for that. Obviously, they have to be quite special in terms of being able to build rapport and stick with the participants and build that connection to then influence them. How did you go about recruiting those ambassadors, and what were the most successful routes for you?
Yeah. We did. I was very, very lucky, I have to be honest, with some great ambassadors that came forward. I had such an amazing team. They rose to 18 in the end. But sometimes it was me, a weekly small broadcast on Facebook or other social media, pleading for volunteers, or men in particular at some stage, I can remember asking. So I was incredibly lucky, and most of it came through social media, but also we had a lot of leaflets and booklets given out. You know, got to give mention to the Active at Home from the public health, and we gave leaflets out in our food boxes at the beginning, and that on the one side of the leaflet it was asking people to participate and what we could provide them with and help them with for physical activity and long-term health conditions. And on the other side of the leaflet was, if you have a long-term condition and you feel that you can give to our programme and really motivate and enhance what we're doing, then please get in touch as well. So those food boxes went out to thousands of people, and obviously they were in homes where you know, they also went out to vaccination centres as well, wherever we were allowed to follow the guidelines of COVID, but also get them out in a poster form or on screens. We reached out as much as we could, and that's what brought the ambassadors in. We also had a lot of networks between ourselves already, and with our partners. Again, it was something that was really helped with our partners, because they put the word out amongst their networks as well. So that was a brilliant form of partnership working. And yes, very, very lucky, and so nice that people came forward. And I think that's what spurred everyone on, because they were a living, breathing version of long-term health conditions that were a successful, motivated individuals.
Yeah, and it was quite multifaceted in a way, in terms of having to put all that together through different partners.
Yes, definitely, and something I really enjoyed, actually, and built up so much rapport and so many networks out there, that I use them still now, and people are coming back to us asking what we're doing now, and vice versa, you know. So I've noticed how many networks are out there, and yeah, I spin plates and enjoy it. Try not to drop any.
Another question that's come in, Sonia, was around whether you delivered any training or what guidance did you end up giving to your ambassadors around health conditions, and particularly you mentioned mental health was something that was quite prominent among your participants. How did you provide your ambassadors with the right level of knowledge around that when that came up?
Yeah, I went on to the likes of Coaching UK, Sports Coach UK, all those different types, and they were really good from the point of view they were offering free courses generally, or obviously they turn their courses online, and that it was a lot of research in the background doing that sort of thing. A mention of the Wright Foundation, they were really helpful, and they would go specifically into detail on specific conditions. And there's lots, I didn't realise how many webinars there were out there that I could tap into. And some ambassadors, I needed to teach them how to use Zoom and how to do Teams in the first place, so that they could get on to all these different workshops, and mental health was a real big one that we looked into. Mental health first aid was an important one, and then as we came out of lockdown, we did the more health walk leader and running leader, so that we could get out and about once we could be outdoors. So people did their theory online, then once we were out of lockdown, they then could go and do their practical levels. So it was so good that people turned to the internet and turned to putting webinars on, because I could really look in some detail. And Sport England were really helpful themselves, because they have quite a lot of resources in the background of what I could tap into for my ambassador team. Yeah, it was great.
Brilliant, thank you. And just one last question, because we're running out of time, but there are a few unfortunately we haven't got to. But there was a question around you surveyed programme participants, just in terms of did you manage to survey all of them? How many were involved in that feedback loop that you did?
I think there was about, I think it was 60–70%. So we got quite a high number who told us in the beginning where they were at, and then did the 12 weeks later. So it was a reasonable amount, because we had them engaged all of that time, and we did phone calls. That was really helped us, because often we needed to email out to ask for their questionnaires to be filled in, and then sometimes with the digital divide as well, the ambassadors had to offer to fill it in for them, and that was how we still managed to get so many responses, because that digital divide unfortunately meant that sometimes we were never going to get that response unless they were talking down the phone to their usual ambassador that they trusted. Those weeks.
Well, we'll have to leave it. Thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there. And thanks to everyone who's joined this session. I'm sure you'll all agree it's been super enlightening and really interesting. Lots there. If you did have any burning questions in the audience, or want to follow up, feel free to contact me and I'll help sort of filter any other questions that we didn't manage to get to. Hopefully you'll also join some of the other area sessions too that are taking place over the next couple of days. You can find links to all of those in your invite for this session as well, or any queries or problems with that, just get in touch with me, Barbara@insightangels.com. But we'll close there. Thank you so much again. Thanks, Sonia. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks very much.